On April 29th, as Saigon crumbles, a small contingent of U.S. State Department, CIA workers, and Marines who remained in Vietnam begin a hasty and desperate evacuation of...
Picture the chaos. A war capital under fire, Americans trapped, the enemy closing in. A movie thriller? No, the 1975 fall of Saigon was all too real. And tonight, for the first time, a Metro man is talking about his dramatic role in the massive two-day evacuation effort, focusing on the U.S. Embassy, and how when the last choppers flew away, something was amiss. Something that led him on a historic final flight. America's decade-long war in Vietnam is over. The political will gone.
Here they are, pouring down the main avenue.
The Viet Cong rolling in. Now, with Saigon under siege, the United States launches Operation Frequent Wind, a massive effort to evacuate Americans and others who face death at the hands of their enemy. And one of the daring chopper pilots charged with landing his CH-46 on the U.S. Embassy's roof.
And when we were sitting here on the top, you could see here's where all the T-72 tanks were lined up.
Captain Tom Holden, serving his second tour of duty in Nam, fearless in the moment.
I guess because when you're flying, you're so busy working the machine, you don't think about it so much.
But to get here and Tom Holden's reluctant date with history, you have to start here, Arcata, California. As a young lad, a gunnery sergeant neighbor shared a Marine magazine.
Can't read Leatherneck every year in and year out, and not want to be a Marine.
So Holden enlisted, entered an officer's training program at Humboldt State in Northern California, then eventually flight school in Florida, commissioned a second lieutenant. That was 1967. By 1969, Lieutenant Holden was serving his first tour of duty, dropping combat troops into war zones.
I really never gave it much thought, to be honest with you. Again, when you're young, you're invincible, you don't think about those things.
And alive. His year-long tour of duty over, Lieutenant Holden returned stateside to Camp Lejeune, minus a few Marine buddies.
It was very depressing. But you just, I mean, that was sort of part of the deal.
Part of his deal, a return to Vietnam as America began winding down. A second tour, much different than his first, this one to get Marines out, not take them in. The anxious wait for orders ended April 29th, 1975, just after lunch.
It was around 1:45, almost 2 o'clock, and people were running all over the place saying, "Why aren't you guys in the air? What's going on?" And, well, someone's got to tell us. And they said, "Well, get out of here now and go do it."
Launching from the deck of the USS Hancock, Operation Frequent Wind opens. Now Captain Holden and his crew tasked with search and rescue, just in case anything goes wrong.
And finally, around, I think it was 5:30, that they said, "Heck, no more search and rescue, start going and get people."
So your mission started search and rescue, but then it became apparent.
Get people out.
The Viet Cong advancing rapidly, thousands of South Vietnamese storming the embassy, American lives on the line. All as darkness set in on Saigon.
They told us not to put on the rotators, the red lights on the aircraft, so if anybody wanted to take a shot at us, they wouldn't be able to see us. And so every once in a while you get a little close, you'd see the cockpit lights going the other way.
Close calls, but after 5 successful missions, Captain Holden and his exhausted crew landed safely on the USS Hancock. One chopper crew did not. In the chaos ditching into the sea, 2 crew members lost.
The smart guys all went to bed. Let's be honest.
But higher-ups asked Captain Holden and his crew to stay up and investigate that crash, with Frequent Wind winding down. Or so they thought. As the sun rose over the South China Sea, the chopper blades now still, the air silent. A frantic realization.
That's when they came and got me and my crew and said, "You need to go back in." And the question was why, of course, and they had forgotten 11 Marines that were still on the embassy, the last 11 security guards.
A Marine chopper evacuated a reluctant U.S. ambassador at around 4:30 that morning. His security detail promised a chopper would be back. But a couple of hours passed before Captain Holden's crew, still awake and in flight suits, working their investigation, got the frantic word. A final flight must launch.
And I think from the time they told us to go, we were probably airborne in about 15 minutes.
You were at the right place at the right time.
Well, you could say that, or I was at the wrong place at the wrong time. As it turned out, it worked well.
But not without its own harrowing moments. Between the ship and Saigon, a ferocious storm.
There was no brakes at the top, so we went back down, and about 1,000 feet to 1,500 feet, we penetrated through the bottom core, and took some very, very nasty weather.
From there, smooth flying down the Saigon River to the embassy, by now ringed with North Vietnamese troops and tanks, and likely past the deadline to evacuate. Another harrowing moment.
I think the North Vietnamese, it was early morning, they probably were punchy. They'd probably been up most of the night also. They had bigger fish to fry.
But as you're looking down at these tanks,
it was a concern. We got contact, radio contact with the 11 Marines, told them we were coming in. They were ready as soon as we landed. I think the ramp was down before we landed. They ran onto the aircraft. Ramp came up, and away we went back down the river.
Back to the Okinawa to drop off the 11 rescued souls, captured in this photo just moments before embassy liftoff. A final flight that made it, just barely.
We probably had about 10 minutes. I mean, it was dicey.
10 minutes of fuel left.
Yeah, probably about that. That was a little nerve-wracking because you never want to run out of fuel.
The final flight did not, refueling and returning safely to the Hancock, its weary crew consigned to history, even if this iconic photo is often misrepresented as the final flight.
This is the official logbook.
Showing 9 hours, 6 missions, including that true final flight on 30 April. A flight shown landing that fateful morning, now Colonel Tom Holden insists, was no more heroic than any other.
You don't consider yourself a hero, though.
No. I consider myself most fortunate to have served in the Marine Corps for over 30 years, and it was the best time of my life. I'd still be doing it, but I got old. It's a young man's game.
A game that includes a son, Lieutenant Colonel Jason Holden, like his dad, a Marine aviator. This reluctant final flight warrior finally sharing his story for that son, his grandsons, and legions of new military warriors.
A lot of things going on. I think the young kids today are making history every day. Every day.
Tom Holden says he never again saw the final 11 aboard his rescue chopper, codenamed appropriately enough, Swift 22. His Marine career would eventually lead him to Kansas City in 1993 to oversee the Marine Corps portion of the Military Finance Center. Holden retired in 1996, a decorated full colonel, 21 years after that final flight. John Holt, Fox 4 News, working for you.